Hello, this meeting of the Planning and Zoning for November 6, 2024 will come to order. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Lori.
Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Childs.
Here.
Member Garrod. Member Faison.
Here.
Member Moscoso. Here. Alternate Member Findler. Alternate Member Rogers.
Here. Well, we do have a quorum, and let's just stop and say that we had two members running for city council, and Macon Moscoso was elected to city council. Speech. And Chris Childs did a good job, but he lost. When does her resign to run law come into play?
So the resign to run law doesn't apply to this body, and the two members who were running still continue to serve today. And on November 26th, Megan Moscoso will be sworn in as a city council member. And so she's able to serve on the meeting tonight. I don't know that we will have a second meeting in November for P&Z. We do. So we'll evaluate whether or not she'll be serving on that meeting or not. But she will be sworn in for city council on the 26th.
We don't want to kick her out prematurely. Okay, the approval of the minutes of the meeting of October 2nd.
Move to approve as presented.
Motion made by Vice Chairman Aton. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Member Childs. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Chelsea, would you read the quasi-judicial confirmation procedures?
Yes, sir. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have no old business, new business. Item A, petitions and requests from the public present. I got a cough drop in my mouth to make sure that I maintain my voice. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Okay.
Tony Schifolo, the historic Norwood House. I'm here not only to congratulate Ms. Moscoso on her step to council, same place to sit probably, just a different job, and to mourn the loss to the planning and zoning of Ms. Moscoso with her vast knowledge and her infinite interest and ability to dig deep and research and really explore the issue and the questions of the actual zoning and the comp plan, which our new mayor tends to not know much about. And I am very concerned from some comments that he made concerning the Planning and Zoning Committee. And I wonder if anyone else shares the concern that he brought up the issue of streamlining, perhaps eliminating the planning and zoning as we get rid of nationally the education department and tear apart the health system and stuff. So I just really worry about the planning and zoning because of my homeownership in what is being I refer to as West Titusville, and the gentrification that is coming to that. And without the protection of planning and zoning and people like Ms. Moscoso and her knowledge and her interest and her depth of research, I get very afraid. And so that's my comment. Thank you for letting me speak.
Stay there for a second. Yes, I've heard that same thing. And I had lunch with the mayor today. I told him about it. And he says that will be in the briefings to the mayor when he takes office. I'm sure the city attorney will brief him and the city manager. As far as I know, and I think I know it, state law requires a local planning agency. So he might want to get rid of us, but he can't.
Oh.
I understand what he's saying about streamlining, but advertising goes in, that you have to have the public hearings, depending on what it is, and the advertising takes weeks. So we'll
So it'll be
learn
like
from
the
making
trains that
comments.
pass through town now and stop so frequently. Streamlining is not exactly fast. Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
rest tonight. Thank you.
Any other people that like to speak? Okay, old business, we have none. New business, item A, Eddie?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. This item begins on page 9. This is the consolidated fees for development applications and legal advertising ordinance. The city offers a number of significant services to its residents, business owners, and visitors for which it charges fees that should be commensurate with the cost incurred by the city to perform the service. Currently, the city's development application fees are separated by the cost of processing the application and the cost of advertising any necessary public hearing. The city regularly evaluates the true cost of services and proposes adjustments where necessary. Based on an evaluation of advertising costs for the past year, it is recommended that the advertising fees be increased. Further, the advertising fees should be consolidated into the development application fees. The consolidated fees will provide ease of understanding by the public and implementation by the city. The staff recommends amending the Development Review Procedures Manual, Section 17, by this ordinance and updating the development application fees in order to include the cost of required advertising. Just kind of a quick summary. The city clerk's office is responsible for procuring the legal advertisements for a lot of the quasi-judicial items that you hear and the ordinances that you hear. And they've noticed that the cost that we've been charging applicants hasn't been fully covering the cost of advertising. And so in order to simplify things, one, increase the amount that we charge for the advertising to cover that cost, but then also to simplify for our applicants, because right now we have two different fee schedules. We have a fee schedule that's for advertising and a fee schedule that's for application fees. So when an applicant asks us, if I'd like to rezone my property, how much is it going to cost? We don't have a flat rate fee, a fee schedule that includes just one fee. We have to refer to two different resolutions, or I think they're adopted by ordinance now, but previously they were resolutions. And so instead of consulting two different schedules of fees, one for application and one for advertising, we're proposing to simplify that by consolidating these and increasing the cost of the advertising fee.
Any questions? Mr. Glendo, Vice Chairman Aton.
Just looking at these, and understanding what comes before us, it seems like a just not to pick on anybody, but like a Tranquility, a massive project, the Titusville Mall project, those kinds of things are massive. And then there's, I think at the corner of
You probably need to speak.
the corner of Fox Lake Road in that area, there's, I think, a little double townhome or something going on there. Are some of these, if it meets a particular criteria, it's kind of a flat rate? Or is there some discretion that, I know some of these bigger ones, you guys put a tremendous amount of effort into. Is that fee commensurate with the amount of effort, or is it just kind of a one-size-fits-all type of a thing?
Generally speaking, so some of those examples that you gave, some of them have different application types to them. So, for example, the Tranquility also has a community development district application fee that was significantly larger than just a simple small-scale amendment or a comprehensive plan amendment. If you'll notice, some of the fees have an plus $8 per acre, and that's what that's attempting to get at, is to charge more for these applications that are going to have that are changing a larger area of the city's future land use map and likely require more analysis.
$8 an acre seems cheap.
Any other questions? Mr. Rogers?
Is there any way in which, I would imagine not, but is there any way in which this would result in a reduced visibility for notification to the public? Like, obviously, when you're advertising something, you're still going to be advertising it, but was there some way in which, being in this separate department, the community development fees, that went onto some list that was then public, or was there any other way that helped enhance transparency and publicity for what was being planned?
No, in fact, I would suggest that this improves transparency for our applicants who are wanting to know what their application fees are going to be. Instead of having to refer to two different documents, now they have one single ordinance that'll have all the application fees, a combined application fee, instead of having to kind of add it up piecemeal.
Okay, but
There's no additional advertising or notification through having separate fees.
But my point is, I see the point of making it easy for people who are making these applications, but I also just want to make sure that we've still got the same visibility for the citizens to be able to see, what's happening. But the advertising component doesn't change, and there was no particular publicity that was coming from the other, just simply the other development fee.
That's correct.
Okay, and the other question just was, it seemed a little, some of these things, some of these fees doubled, $1,575 to $3,025, and some of them sort of just bumped up a little, it seemed like they were, it was like the 735 went to 2,185, so more than doubled. I just wondered why the discrepancy between the percentage jump in some of these?
It's a good question. It's because some of the applications require either a larger legal advertisement or more than one legal advertisement. And so where you'll see the biggest increases are where the legal advertisement cost is the highest.
Okay. So the conditional use permit going from $1,575 to $1,775, it's a $200 jump. That's just not a really big thing, right? It's just a small. Okay, okay.
Any other questions? Have you ever advertised in Florida today? It's expensive. It really is. So I think what that staff is proposing. But I will ask this question. How does this compare to other cities in Brevard County?
As far as the cost or the format?
The cost.
I don't have an answer for you on the fly. I can tell you that what we did when we were considering changing the format, the structure of it was looking at the other cities. Do they charge a separate advertising fee or roll it in? And from the examples that we saw, this was the cleanest way to do it. But as far as how different the application fees are, I'd have to do more research for you.
Okay. Vice Chairman Aton.
I've read some stuff that the whole legal advertising business, for lack of a term or a better term, or it's getting to the point where Chairman Richardson mentioned Florida Today, that the things that people look at are changing. Is there, what's the trend, or is there any focus on, is this really the best way to create transparency to the public as far as the way we're advertising things? Not so much that we are advertising it, but, you know, is it the right fit still versus 20 years ago?
Sure. If the state statutes were to change to allow us to advertise in a way that was more cost-effective or more visible than a newspaper, we'd be interested in seeing what we could do with that. But right now, this is what we're required to do by law.
I can just chime in that I know that the discussion of what newspaper we're going to publish in and the method of advertising has been a conversation that I recall in my experience here, at least no less than, 2 different council conversations, where it's been evaluated, information has been brought back, and it's been determined that no changes were warranted or wanted by the council because of the information presented. If that helps your decision-making, it's not like it's something we haven't looked at.
Member Moscoso.
How is the Development Review Committee advertised? Is that one also in the newspaper?
I know that it's published as a sunshine meeting, but I don't believe that those items are advertised in the paper.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look into that.
I mean, I've attended one of those, and I think it was just published downstairs. So I was just curious of the 250, and because that committee is also comprised of staff, correct? So is that an additional charge for the staff's time, or?
Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, I didn't see it anywhere on there. I was just curious.
The Development Review Committee's listed on page 12 of 16 under letter I, near the top of the page. And it says there's no changes to the $250. So yeah, just because there's no advertising, then there's no change to the fee.
Any other questions? Mr. Rogers.
Besides the newspaper, is this information posted anywhere else? Simply like on the city website or?
The ordinances,
Yeah, when people apply to, I don't know, change zoning or something like that.
to be honest, I'd have to ask the city clerk's office if they post it on the website. They post a lot of information, so I would be surprised if they don't, but at a minimum, that's what we're required to do is publish it in the newspaper.
I was
So-
just thinking, I mean, obviously there's what you're required to do as a minimum, but I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful for, again, transparency's sake, which I think we all value here, simply to put it in another location, because, we all know that newspapers are not always the first thing that people go to for information. Perhaps it would be nice to have a page somewhere that has kind of upcoming rezoning and things like that, so that the citizens are more aware, more able to find what's cooking.
So in the recent past, about 2 years ago, the Florida legislature incorporated a new requirement for all Florida cities and counties to publish a business impact estimate on the city's website concurrent or prior to no later than the date of the first advertisement for any ordinance. And so at a minimum, the general public could go to the City of Titusville's Business Impact Estimates webpage. I don't know if Mr. Rogers can see it from behind my shoulder, but you just type it in the search bar and it will give you a list of all the ordinances and the date that it was posted on this website. And it won't tell you all of the content of the ordinance, but if you click on each, it'll give you the title of the ordinance, which is supposed to give you a sufficient description of what the ordinance is intended to do. And if you wanted to obtain that ordinance, of course, you could contact the city staff member responsible for it or the city clerk to get that ordinance in its entirety.
Okay, and what is the name of that page?
They're called Business Impact Estimates. And it's a requirement from Florida statutes that we post this on our webpage on or before the date of the first advertising of any ordinance. And there's some that are exempt from filling out part of the form, but you'll get the title of the ordinance in every single form.
Are you familiar with that? Do you, I mean, I know that both of you in your,
Is your mic on?
I know that both of you in your daily jobs, chew through stuff that would probably put most people to sleep after 3 paragraphs. And so, I kudos for that skill. But do you consider this to be fairly user-friendly as far as a sort of, Jane and Joe citizen go?
I would say so, yeah. So it's the same information that we're publishing in the newspaper. It's the top of the ordinance, which kind of lays out what's being proposed, what's changing, what deletions are being made or additions or edits. That same language that we would publish in the newspaper is what's on that form. So it is basically this, what you were asking for, that same information is on the webpage. I forgot about that. We have a web page just for that.
And then, of course, the calendar tells you when each of the board meetings are, the city website has also a calendar that has the agenda posted for the different boards that talk about the different topics of discussion that any user could find from the front page of the city's website, because the calendar is highlighted on that front page.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Do we have any cards, Lori?
Yes, sir. Tony Schiffelo.
I'll open the public hearing.
Schiffelo, the Historic Norwood House. I looked over this in the agenda packet, which is very easy to find now on the website. I want to congratulate the clerk staff for making this accessible. But I question, and I even question even more now, who sets the ad rates? The state? Does the state have a level, or is it the publisher that sets?
Florida Today.
Florida Today. Being one of those nerds who actually subscribes to the legal notices from Florida Today and look over them and then click on the more entertaining ones, I've rarely seen much from Titusville in their little recaps. That doesn't mean it isn't there. But it does mean that the average citizen is not going to run across them very easily. And I want to know now, what if Florida Today changes their rates next month and you've just folded it into your whole process? Wouldn't it be simpler to have your rates for your multifamily and your single family and the variance and all the things that you listed in those documents, and have a rate chart for advertising that it's $19.95 per word, blah, 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 or whatever it is, and you just look there? Because what's going to keep Florida Today from changing their rates? Do you have to go through this process again, is my question, when they do change their rates? Do you have to, Eddie, do you have to go through this process again if Florida Today changes? Or Mr. Chairman.
I think it's a matter of competition. If there were several newspapers, and I've been in this before when I was on council, that before we had lights and we worked with chisels. We had a couple of different, there was the Brevard Sentinel and the Star Advocate and the Florida Today and something else. I can't remember what it was. But we had competition among those.
Yeah, we have to have
We
newspapers
We
too.
awarded the bid for a year to one or the other one. And so it was least expensive then.
I see.
And I think we don't have much competition now.
But my question is, since there is no competition and the way of the American capitalism is that they could raise their rates, my question is, what is the process for if your advertising publisher raises his rates? Does this process have to be gone through again where it's brought to council? Why is it folded into the price of the permits that you're going to be examining, or the?
Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, but we'd have to go through amending the ordinance again, right?
That's correct.
Then why are you folding it into the other rates?
I think it's a matter of simplification.
But it doesn't simplify things if
It does.
the rates change again.
does if you're the one that has to pay the fee. Am I right?
So even if we kept them separate, if the legal ads fees were to change, we'd have to bring that back if it were adopted by an ordinance. So the process would be the same.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Vice Chairman Aton.
There is verbiage in the bold print at the beginning of the ordinance, toward the bottom says section 1710, special circumstances, authorizes the city to collect fees equal to cost if new advertising requirements are created. I don't know if that covers them changing their rates, but it seems like equal to the cost of, provide some flexibility there to make sure the city's not losing money in the process.
Any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing and we'll bring it back to the commission. Any other questions? Anyone care to make a motion? Mr. Vice Chairman Aton?
Sure. I'll move to approve. What's the title of it here? Where'd it go? Ordinance number XX-24. I guess it doesn't have a real number yet, as presented.
I'll second.
Member Moscoso seconded. Any other discussion? Roll call, please. Lori?
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Childs. Yes. Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. This will be heard at city council when? At their next meeting?
At the November 26th meeting.
Okay. That's when the new council takes office, isn't it?
That's right.
And next item on the agenda is the presentation by the TE Chair, Lorlee Thompson, and she should be here in a few minutes, so do we want to have a break or do we want to discuss something else? It's not on the agenda.
Councilwoman Moscoso, I think, has a speech.
Oh, really?
Yes, she was saying that she wanted to say something to us.
Okay, we'll call a break for approximately 10 minutes. As soon as she gets here, then I'll call us back to order. I saw her presentation at Sunrise Rotary last Tuesday, and it really was an informative presentation. And there was a member of council there that was amazed at what you're about to see. Laura Lee?
There we go. Okay. Laura Lee Thompson, 3550 Irwin Avenue, Mims. Let me figure out which way I gotta push the button. That's good. Okay, here we go. So I can roll. So thank you for the opportunity for me to speak today. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm really glad you liked my presentation. This picture looks very different than it did the first time NASA revealed a view of Florida's night sky from space. There's a lot more lights in our landscape today. You see that tiny little black gap along the coastline where the yellow arrow is? That is Canaveral National Seashore Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge and the northern portion of the Kennedy Space Center. Northern Brevard County is the only place where one can stand on the west shore of an estuary along Florida's east coast and look towards a barrier island and not see lights from hotels, condos, and houses. The headwaters of all three components of the Indian River Lagoon system come together in this very special area in northern Brevard County. The Indian River, Mosquito Lagoon, and Banana River, they're estuaries, vibrant areas where freshwater from natural sources on the land mixes with saltwater from the ocean to create incredibly productive ecosystems. Our seagrass meadows and salt marsh impoundments that we have up here in our area supply life to the other areas of the lagoon where overdevelopment limits the functionality of the lagoon. This part of the lagoon is far from any ocean inlets, and no flushing occurs from the ocean here. What goes into the lagoon stays into the lagoon here. The lagoon's sandy beaches form a central habitat for many organisms. Seagrass and other organic materials wash up on the beach to form wrack, which provides food and habitat for many insects, birds, and small crustaceans, while it incubates beach plants that help anchor the shoreline. This habitat provides many important services to humans, including erosion control, recreation, and jobs. Most important, sandy beaches provide protection from storms and storm surges that cause coastal flooding. Sandy beaches are important for fiddler crabs. These little crabs help preserve our coastal wetlands by burrowing deep into the mud of the marshes. The crabs create a maze of tunnels that aerate the marsh grasses and help them to grow. Fiddler crabs are also a vital link in the lagoon's food web. Sandy beaches are crucial for the survival of larger crabs too, as this is where horseshoe crabs come to spawn. They can't lay their eggs on rocks and seawalls. Horseshoe crabs are the oldest living species on Earth, having survived unchanged for more than 450 million years. Many fish species dine on horseshoe crab eggs and juvenile horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crab eggs are also a crucial food source for shorebirds, whose migrations coincide with horseshoe crab spawning. Today, much of the land that shorebirds rely on has been lost, damaged, or it's not being managed effectively. As such, shorebirds are one of the most imperiled bird groups. Our own Titusville Causeway is the most important place in the entire state for spawning horseshoe crabs and the shorebirds that depend on the horseshoe crab eggs for survival. More than 90% of the lagoon shorelines are hard armored, protected by either a vertical seawall or by rocks placed along the shoreline. These three videos were all filmed on the same day. It was blowing about 20 to 25 and gusting to 35 miles an hour out of the northeast. So this first video was taken next to the large pavilion in Sandpoint Park. And you can see what happens when big waves slam into the seawall. There's a washing machine-like effect when the waves hit the wall and bounce off and then head back in the same direction from whence they came. This backwash causes severe scouring of the river bottom. Seagrasses cannot grow in those conditions. Worms, clams, and other bottom creatures can't survive there either. It's a little better with rock revetments, but there's still backwash coming off the rocks. And the large waves, they'll pull the dirt out from behind seawalls and rock revetments, which will lead to failure of these systems that are supposed to protect the shoreline. Now watch what happens, how gently the waves wash up and recede from the sandy beach, which was on the north side of the Titusville Causeway. And seagrasses, they can grow all the way up, to the low water line when they have a sandy beach. So it's gusting 35 miles an hour. I could almost barely stand up, and yet those waves are just gently washing up on that beach. This is what the north side of the causeway looked like in March of 2017. We had a beautiful sandy beach that has been used by residents for many decades. That beach was here when my parents were kids in the 1940s. They talked about going swimming on the causeway. This is what the north side of the causeway looked like the morning after Hurricane Milton. And, when it's complete, this project is supposed to, I think it's supposed to reduce the stormwater that's going into the lagoon. That is its main function. But there's a seawall there. And you saw what happens when waves hit the seawall. So this is what happened during Hurricane Milton. I don't know if is there a pointer on here, Eddie? I don't see a red button. I'm not going to do anything to mess it up. So you can see in the foreground where the sidewalk has collapsed. And then further back, you see where the sidewalk is like the same level as the seawall, or the thing I was told was not a seawall, but it sure looks like a seawall to me. The waves came over.
This is new construction, right?
This is the new construction. This is the north side of the causeway. And the deal is that they are supposed to put in a beach on the other side of the thing that's not a seawall, that looks like a seawall. And they're supposed to give us a beach. Well, because of the seawall, I don't think sand is going to stay there very long. We're going to be finding ourselves having to keep putting sand there. So I don't know how long the county is going to do that, but they had to sign a memorandum of understanding with FWC that the county would always maintain a sandy beach there because of the significance for the spawning horseshoe crabs. So what are we doing on the south side of the causeway to try to save its beach? There, no, I'm going the wrong way here. There we go. Wave attenuation devices. So these are being constructed by Sea and Shoreline Aquatic Solutions. There was a few of them. They started out on the causeway, but now they're over by where the Big Apple Plaza was. There'll be like about 650 of them when they're done, and they're almost done. They hope to be putting them in the water by the end of the month. The dangerous, ugly rocks and construction debris that's there along the causeway will be removed, and sand will be added, so we will have a beach that goes all the way down the south side of the causeway. These are wave attenuation devices that are located at Simmons Park, which is on the east side of Tampa Bay, but that'll give you an idea of how they function. So they go out in a double array, and everywhere there's a gap, there's another wave attenuation device behind it. So there's no open holes for the water to go through. It's always going to be hitting either the front side or the one that's behind it. And they have holes, they have triangular holes in them, so they're hollow. And when the waves hit them, what happens is the water will pass through them because they're hollow and because they're not right on top of each other, but it knocks the power out of the waves. And any suspended solids that are within the waves, they deposit on the beach that's along the shoreline. So since they put these in the Pinellas County or Hillsborough County, they had to re-nourish the beach initially, but they've never had to put any more sand on that beach since then. And the beach has gotten wider and wider and wider, and it's from those. And as soon as they go into the water, they instantly become essential fish habitat because mussels and oysters and clams and algae and sponges grow on them. Bait fish come and hide inside them, and when you have bait fish, then the predator fish come in. The fishermen love them. They catch big snook and redfish and trout around them. So we're going to have that same effect here on our Titusville Causeway. So when both of these projects are completed, the Titusville Causeway will have more than $12 million invested in infrastructure along the causeway, more than $8 million on the north side, and a little over $4 million on the south side. The north side is a perfect example of gray infrastructure for resiliency, and the south side of the causeway, which is those 4 pictures there, are artist renderings of what the south side of the causeway will look like. That is green infrastructure for resiliency. So we're going to be like a showcase for the two different, the two different types of resiliency. And you can see the wave attenuation in the upper right. You see there's a boat and then there's like a white line. That white line by that boat, that is the wave attenuation devices. So that's how far offshore they'll be. And they'll provide a calm lagoon that seagrass will come back in because we won't have that wave scouring effect that we have on the causeway now with all the construction debris and rocks that are there. And seagrass, we're going to plant seagrass, but it's also, I know it's going to come in naturally. So what are seagrasses? Why are they useful? Seagrasses are flowering plants that live underwater. They provide prime habitat for fish, crabs, and other marine life, and they're considered a key barometer of an estuary's overall health. Seagrass meadows are the foundation for the astonishing diversity of life that's found in the Indian River Lagoon. 1 single acre of seagrass can support 40,000 fish and 50 million small invertebrates like shrimp, crabs, oysters, and snails. Seagrasses are beneficial because they filter water by absorbing nutrients and pathogens. They remove carbon dioxide from the water and use it to build their roots and leaves. Seagrasses hold down sediments and capture fine particles, which increases water clarity. Seagrass meadows buffer coastal communities from the full impact of waves, and they protect shorelines from erosion. Seagrasses need the salinity above 20 parts per thousand in order to thrive. Numerous commercially and recreationally important animals use the Indian River Lagoon and its seagrass beds. You might think of some of these fish as offshore species, like the snappers and the groupers, and the mackerels, but all of these highly recognizable animals spend the early part of their lives in the seagrass meadows of estuaries. Our Indian River Lagoon is hugely important for our offshore ocean fisheries. This slide from the St. Johns River Water Management District shows where the seagrasses are returning. And the uptick that you see in the graph that's all the way over on the right-hand side, that is all due to new growth in seagrass in the Mosquito Lagoon and the northern Indian River. And it's really hard to see, but the left-hand picture is 2021, and you can see that there's seagrass growing along the east side of Mosquito Lagoon, and that's about the only place it was growing. And then in 2023, you've got seagrass growing along the west side of the Mosquito Lagoon, and you've also got a patch that's growing along Black Point, south of Haulover Canal in the Indian River Lagoon, and a little tiny patch that's north of Mims on the west side of the northern Indian River Lagoon. That was 2 years ago, or no, last year. So the Water Management District, they only do these transects every 2 years. If they had done a transect this year, almost the entire shoreline of the west side of the Indian River Lagoon would have solid seagrass from just north of the Mims Fish Camp all the way up to Scottsmore Landing. Miles and miles and miles of seagrass. It's phenomenal.
To what,
See where
to
I
what is that
am.
attributed? To what is that attributed? That,
I'm going to get to that. Just let me turn the page here and catch my breath. Okay, so the increase was 5,775 acres, 5,261 acres for the southern Mosquito Lagoon, and 514 acres for the northern Indian River. And so it was no surprise to me when the seagrass came back so strong in the southern Mosquito Lagoon. After all, there's no houses on septic, there's no ditches and ponds discharging stormwater, and there's no overwhelmed wastewater treatment facilities releasing sewage into the southern Mosquito Lagoon. And the only fresh water that goes into the southern Mosquito Lagoon falls from the sky as rain. That's it. Zero stormwater. Only rain goes into the southern Mosquito Lagoon. Hurricanes Ian and Nicole washed seawater over the dunes at Canaveral National Seashore and into Mosquito Lagoon during September and October of 2022. The salinity in the southern Mosquito Lagoon until September of this year stayed as high as that of seawater. And also, because we had a lack of rainfall in the early part of our summer, the salinity in the northern Indian River was also as high as the salinity of seawater. So between the lack of fresh water that was going into those two bodies of water and then the fact that the salinity was so high, that's what caused the water management district scientists believe that and also both bodies of water are shallow, so the sunlight can reach the bottom. Our part of the Indian River is a lot deeper than the northern end is. So you had all of these factors that triggered seagrass growth from a seed bank. And so they've now started doing research just real recently, doing core samples all up and down the Indian River, looking for seeds in the core samples. And where they're finding a lot of seeds in the sediments of the lagoon, that's where the seagrasses are trying to come back. And they have a lot of seeds in the core samples in the northern Indian River Lagoon and the southern Mosquito Lagoon. So this video was taken at Scottsmore Landing in the northern Indian River in August of this year. The summer of 2024 was very dry with a major deficit in rainfall. Like Mosquito Lagoon, the northern Indian River is very shallow, which allows sunlight to reach the seagrass. Higher than normal salinity may have helped trigger growth from the seed bank here. Seagrass is growing just like this all along the western shore of the Indian River for miles, from Little Flounder Creek all the way to north of Scottsmore Landing. This is unbelievable. And if you look close, you can see little snails that are on the seagrass blades and snails on the bottom. It's full of life. So why are seagrasses doing so well north of the railroad bridge while so little is happening along Titusville shoreline? This is a big part of the reason. We have been draining a large area of wetlands and stormwater from developments into the Indian River for decades. The water does pass through. We have 4 baffle boxes that the water goes through on its journey to the river. This area, the big part of that funnel-looking thing is in the St. Johns River basin. It's not supposed to be draining into the Indian River Lagoon. And so it goes into the lagoon at the end of St. John Street, which is right behind the Dusty Rose. So if you wait till it rains, and then if you want to see a site, go right there where Indian River Avenue kind of makes that curve, and there's a big stormwater drain right there, and fresh water from that wetland and from some of the developments in Whispering Hills and Forest Hills are draining into the Indian River. Stop right there, okay.
For just a second. This is where the development was that we talked about 2 weeks ago.
Well, just north of the X.
It's in the middle of that area. And it used to drain in the St. John's, and it's causing pollution. It's causing no growth into the Indian River.
because the water, we can't get the salinity high enough by Titusville to support healthy seagrass growth or oysters or clams. That's why these projects at the zoo, they came up and they did a study up here to see if we could plant oysters up here. They didn't even waste their time with oysters. And they tried planting clams, but the clams don't survive either because they have to have salinity above 20 parts per thousand to thrive. And we have salinity that high in the wintertime, but as soon as it starts raining in the wintertime, our salinity goes straight downhill. So the baffle boxes, they take out leaf detritus, trash, and even sand particulates from the stormwater. But even if we filter the stormwater to where it could be used in a hospital, too much fresh water itself is poisonous to the lagoon's animals and its seagrasses. Water from most of this basin once flowed west to the St. Johns River. So remember what I said at the beginning of my talk? Estuaries are vibrant areas where fresh water from natural sources on the land mixes with salt water from the ocean to create incredibly productive ecosystems. Stormwater from development is not a natural source of fresh water. I look like Tony, don't I? And we shouldn't be draining a wetland that's in the St. Johns River Basin into the Indian River. And we've been doing that since the 1940s. How much fresh water have we been putting into the Indian River since the 1940s? And so see where that yellow X is? This is what happened during Ian. Come on. So there's that yellow X is right in the middle of the Bloody Mary ditch, which you've heard Stan talking about in the flooding in the 9 city streets. And there's some of the 9 city streets right there.
Like Carroll Avenue.
That's the end of Carroll Avenue. So you can, where those signs are in the upper left-hand picture, there's a street there. That's the end of a street. The pavement goes all the way to those signs. And so the top pictures are Morebecca Street and Carroll Avenue. And the bottom 2 pictures are in the Temple Terrace area, where the flooding was even worse than it was in the Baker subdivision. So this is what happens, when you're draining a huge wetland, and you've got a big area of water and it's going into a funnel and it's going underground through pipes and stuff, you've constricted that water now. So it was a great big huge ditch where the water was flowing really, really good. And then it goes by the senior center and then it goes underneath Park Avenue and then it gets constricted by the stormwater pipes. And so it backs up. It's pouring out into the Indian River Lagoon, but it's still backing up and creating this flooding along the streets in the older sections of Whispering Hills. So massive flooding of neighborhoods occurred when Hurricane Ian's rainfall. Constriction at culverts caused the floodwaters to back up into streets, overwhelm lift stations failed, and sewage flowed down the streets. This is where the sewage was that the city is saying didn't happen, but it happened. I saw it. So this is the St. John Street outfall. This was in February of this year, and you can actually see the culvert and you can see the rocks along the side of the ditch, and you see the water that's like the color of the St. John's River going out into the Indian River Lagoon, and it's hard to see because of the lighting, but you can definitely see a demarcation between the sand, the white, lighter colored sand in the middle, kind of at the end of the docks, and then the deeper blue of the deeper waters of the Indian River. And that brown water, depending on which way the wind's blowing, it either goes south or north along Riverside Drive. So at a city council meeting recently, Dwight Seaver's wife got up and was talking about how they were planting seagrass and the zoo had planted seagrass, but the seagrass wasn't doing very well. There's why. And then this is what it looked like 4 days after Milton. The culvert is completely underwater. You can't see the rocks along the side of the ditch. It is completely underwater, yet fresh water is pouring out of that thing and going into the Indian River Lagoon. With sea level rise, Titusville is faced with the fact that our stormwater conveyances eventually are going to fail because they're going to all be underwater. So, this happens. It's unfortunate that we get these hurricanes and storms at the same time of the year that we get the king tides. So if you've paid attention to the river, every fall the river gets higher, and it gets higher every year. And so eventually the way that we're moving stormwater and dumping it into the lagoon, it's not going to work anymore. So that fact alone, that should inspire us, to follow the advice of the St. Johns River Water Management District folks and figure out how to create a collection of small stormwater parks that can hold stormwater and let it soak into our aquifer rather than dumping it into the river. Our own comprehensive plan has the lofty goal of locating a park within a 10-minute walk of every citizen in Titusville. That's in your comp plan. Well, what a great way, to create these parks for people to walk to, and what a wonderful addition to our quality of life a collection of stormwater parks would be. And that would be so much better for the river. The Indian River Lagoon, it is more than just a beautiful body of water nestled inside coastal barrier islands. It's one of the greatest estuaries in the entire country. Its diversity of life is unmatched. Its total annual economic value in 2015 was $7.6 billion, a staggering economic impact that affects communities and economies throughout its entire length. Everything about our way of life here in Brevard County is enhanced and given greater value due to the influence of the lagoon. A major cause of the Indian River Lagoon's impairment is reduction of its salinity due to stormwater runoff. We, up here in the northern part of Brevard County, we're the stewards of the portion of the Indian River Lagoon that supplies life to the remainder of the lagoon. We have a great responsibility to ensure that we do the lagoon no further harm. And I've been to the Marine Resources Council Low Impact Development Conference today and tomorrow. And one of the things, that I heard from multiple speakers today, that the new industry standard, as they're struggling with ways to not only keep stormwater from going into the Indian River Lagoon, but also to recharge our aquifer and keep saltwater intrusion from coming in because we've pulled all the fresh water out of our aquifer. They are definitely pushing the concept of small stormwater parks spread throughout the communities along the lagoon. So we have an opportunity here to be a leader. Does anybody have any questions? And thank you for your time. And thank you for inviting me, Eddie.
Mr. Rogers.
Ms. Thompson, thank you for your work and for your caring and for, I don't know, I think it's probably a thankless task sometimes. And I appreciate what you do. I'm trying to remember exactly in what context, but there was a mention made you mentioned hurricanes dumping seawater into the Mosquito Lagoon, but there was a mention made of possibly trying to fix our problem by pumping seawater into our area. Do you know much about whether that's kind of in development or whether it would work or whether it has been tried?
I don't know how. Are you going to run big pipes across the Space Center?
I can only think that would be
10 miles across the Merritt Island to get from the ocean to our area. And so.
I don't know how it was.
Yeah, also our area of the lagoon, we have the widest part of the entire lagoon is right here east of Titusville. Nowhere else along the entire Indian River Lagoon is there as much water
Yeah.
that's being impacted as what we have here in Titusville? People have said, why don't we open an inlet and let salt water come into Mosquito Lagoon? The thing about an inlet is, unless it's really, really deep and you can move a large volume of water through it, it really doesn't have a lot of impact except for just a few miles close to the inlet. So opening up an inlet where these washovers are occurring in Mosquito Lagoon, it's not going to help the Indian River at all. What helped the northern Indian River this year was lack of rainfall and evaporation, and it left the salt water and the fresh water evaporated. I don't know logistically how you could move enough seawater over Merritt Island to get to this part of the lagoon to make that happen.
And so if that doesn't work, that whole area that you showed that used to flow, that comes right up, right up to here, that used to flow to and drain to the St. Johns River, has it been considered trying to reestablish that direction?
Yes.
And can that be done, or do you know much about that?
Yes. So part of the problem is I-95. Before they built I-95, there was sheet flow, down south of Fox Lake Road, that whole area between Highway 50 and Fox Lake Road. There was sheet flow, towards the St. Johns River. But then they built this gigantic dam called I-95 across this area where the sheet flow. There are box culverts underneath I-95. And that's another thing that I'm sure you've heard from Stan, is that the box culverts are not being maintained by FDOT. So I don't know if that's true or not. I have heard it from Stan. I also heard from Stan that, so on the west side of I-95, there's ditches that are in the St. John's National Wildlife Refuge, which is managed by the Merritt Island folks. That if those ditches are not kept cleaned out, then water can't go through them. So the water from these big wetlands on the west side of us is supposed to go through the box culverts under 995 and through ditches out to the St. Johns River. So that's something that needs to be investigated. Jolynn and I met with Kevin Cook and Sandra Reller last week. And we brought this up to Kevin, and Kevin said that he has spoken to the wildlife officials, and they have assured him that the ditches are flowing. But if the ditches are flowing, and we're flooding because of high water in those wetlands, and the water's not moving through the culverts under I-95, well, that would kind of tell you that the ditches aren't functioning on the other side. So there's that needs to be looked into. I have met with Mike McMonigal from St. Johns River Water Management District. He's newly hired. He's been there about a year. He is the Basin Project Manager for the Northern Indian River Lagoon. And he is in complete agreement that we should not be pushing that water through that culvert at the end of St. John Street. But you can't block the ditch. If you block that ditch, you're going to flood all those neighborhoods that are on the west side of Park Avenue, from Harrison Street all the way to the Sheriff's Department. They would all go underwater. So you cannot just put a dam across that ditch. I think that, and I don't even know if we could get the permitting, and I don't even know if this is a viable idea, but I think that we could dig a big lake out in the middle of one of those wetlands and use that, to push our stormwater west, and that would create a nice amenity, to have a nice lake out there that we could go kayaking on, and it would attract birds. And like I said, I don't know if this is a stupid idea or not, but it seems like if you could excavate a big area, that the water could go there and soak down into the aquifer instead of running it into the Indian River Lagoon. The Water Management District, they are aware of what's going on up here. They're more focused on doing the easy projects down in the south end of the county where they have these big canals that they can turn the water west. They all say, you know, it's a challenge on how to fix the plumbing up here. But they also have said, we're here to help. And if our leadership would step up and stick out their hand and say, we need help, not me, but the mayor, the city manager, you know.
Incoming city council.
And, and city
Incoming
council,
city
yeah.
council.
Yeah, that's what they said. They said, you know, get your administration to reach out to us. Because, you know, there's grant money that's available, you know, for resiliency. And this is certainly a resiliency and flooding issue. So we qualify for grant money, but there needs to be a partnership, you know, that can help cobble together some grants. But the first thing has to be our leadership asking for help. It has to come from somebody that's a lot higher up than I am.
Member Charles.
I actually had one more question.
Okay.
I just was going to say, you know, my brother-in-law is actually the president of 1,000 Friends of Florida, and a few years ago, there was a really bad algae bloom, possibly even a red tide farther south, and he said for the first time he had very, very prominent business people coming up to him and saying, we've got to get serious about the environment. And he said, on the one hand, it was gratifying because he said, you know, like finally, it seemed like people in positions of, you know, financial and political power were finally paying attention to what, you know, he said, what the hippies have been saying all along. But he said, you know, on the other hand, it was a little disappointing that, you know, they only, you know, sort of got moved to do so when suddenly their own, you know, money was at risk. Because really the smell was so bad in the area, and you know basically everything was dying. And do you see? You've probably been doing this for a while in this area. Do you see an increased amount of awareness in the sort of business and political community that
No.
this is in fact good business to take care of the environment, or not?
No, and you know, you're talking about the summer of 2018 when, you know, whale sharks and manatees and sea turtles were washing up on the beaches of Sanibel Island. It killed the summer tourism for that summer for Southwest Florida and also the Stewart, Fort Pierce area, because you had green algae over on our coast and red algae, red tide over there. And you are correct. You know, I made a presentation to the board of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. They asked me to come and do a presentation on algae blooms. And I did that presentation to them a month before things really got ugly in Southwest Florida. And yes, you had hoteliers and restaurateurs stepping up going, oh my gosh, we have to do something. But their memories are short because the very next year, we didn't have a red tide. And we didn't have green algae down in Stewart and people having to hold handkerchiefs over their faces to walk around in downtown Stewart. So and also the other thing too is that these coastal incidents, they don't impact the theme parks in Orlando. And those are the guys that have all the power. And so we could have all kinds of horrible things happening in our estuaries, but until it impacts tourism at Disney World and Universal, you know, few hoteliers and restaurant operators from Sanibel Island, they don't have the clout that the tourism world of Orlando has. And that's the sad fact. I mean, I'm on the board of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. I'm their token environmentalist. And I represent the commercial fishing industry. And they'll write a letter, you know, if I ask them to, they'll sign on to different letters that we've asked them to write over the years. But, you know, when it comes to asking them to make a big stink and try to defend their commercial fishermen and their seafood restaurants and stuff, they won't do it. You know, they don't want to rock the boat, you know, in Tallahassee. And so we just keep kicking the can down the road. But your brother-in-law is 100% correct, because the tourism folks in Southwest Florida, they had a really bad summer that summer. Like I
Okay,
said, their memories are short.
Member Childs was first, go ahead.
So for the stormwater parks, besides building like one big, huge lake, if we did multiple stormwater parks, would we need to have them in that certain area that you marked on the map?
No,
Or
they
is
could be
next to-
scattered around, and they don't
Anywhere.
have to be, these do not have to be, I've learned so much at the Low Impact Development Conference today. I mean, they've got technology now where they can do, like, going along a street. They can do impervious concrete on the bike paths along the sides of a street. And then they can plant trees along the street, and the trees help soak up stormwater. They can build big caves underneath the ground, and that can hold stormwater. The technology is astonishing that's out there right now. So,
So if we just focus on it kind of all over the city.
yeah, you
it
can
would
have little
help a
tiny, I
lot,
mean,
yeah.
these, if you've got a linear rain garden that's going all along a street, you know, that could suffice, as well as, and you know, what Kevin said is, like, so much of Titusville is built out, so it would be really hard to go back and retrofit it. You may have to go into a neighborhood and buy a couple of houses and tear them down, and then have a little small park. But there's ways to do this kind of stuff without, you know, without a lot of, without having to tear up a lot of area. But like I said, I am learning so much at that Low Impact Development Conference. The technology every year just gets better and better and better.
Okay.
There's a lot of really smart people, and there's a lot of money to be made in these kind of, you know, retrofits. So there's a lot of really smart people that have jumped on the bandwagon, you know, to create the technology. There's a project, it's called the Underline, and it's a linear project in Miami-Dade County. And I think it's 22 miles long, and it goes underneath the metro. And so they've taken all of that blight and heat-producing mess that's underneath the metro, and they've created a linear park, and it has, like, different themes. They've created the habitat that once was there before the city came in and took out all the trees. It's fascinating. You know, look it up, Underline in Miami-Dade County. It is a fabulous park that's literally underneath the metro. 22-mile linear park.
Member Moscoso.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. I don't know if it's going to be possible for us to have a copy of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Eddie has it. You can
Could you email a
it.
copy to us?
Yeah, it's a big file because of the videos, so it takes a while to download. But yeah, he's got it.
Okay.
I mean, that's how it was here tonight.
But as you were speaking, it reminded me of a group that came up, and they called themselves the Heritage Coalition, and they were in Whispering Hills, and they were having issues with their the ditch behind their house, or the canal behind their house. And what they said is that there was a dispute of who maintained it. So the city said that the neighborhood did, because back in the day it was the HOA, and the residents are saying that the city does. And that's something I've noticed in the past, like, 6 months. I've walked tons of neighborhoods and seeing there's been a lack of maintenance in a lot of our canals. And so it just made me think about the stormwater and how maintenance is such an important part of the stormwater parks as well, making sure our canals are maintained. And but this is a great presentation, very eye-opening, lots of really good information.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Aton.
Mine follows up on Member Childs a little bit. Eddie, I know we've talked a lot about developer incentives as they're presenting things and, you know, stormwater trades and things like that. Has there ever been discussion about a concept where they go way over and above to build out something? I know there was a little bit in Titus Landing where the intersection at Harrison was flooding, it was off the property, but they kind of went over and above with their stormwater to cure, or to at least help prevent some of the flooding there. But in some of the developments, and kind of like Laura Lee said, a lot of the areas in Titusville that are in that yellow area are already built out. So as redevelopment happens and a developer wants to come in and redevelop something, or perhaps there is a vacant tract there that they want to do something with, has there been any discussion or concept where if they go 200% above the stormwater that's required for them to do the development, they get credits to, to basically offload other areas and take the load off of the St. John's water or outfall there?
I'm not aware of any incentives for over-engineering your stormwater design, more so for the LID techniques that are presented at the LID conference, where we're trying to do innovative ways of storing stormwater in ways that can improve the water quality, not so much the water volume. So I haven't seen any cases where there's a 200% storage on the site, more than what they would have needed to store. We don't have any incentives in the code that provide any type of flexibility for doing such an over-engineering.
What's it take to kick that off? Because it seems like, this stuff's not cheap, and the city, even if there was big tracts of land, I'm not sure, I have no idea what, like Dre Park or Dre Lake or whatever they're calling it, but it's something, I'm assuming it's something like that would be, located out or throughout the city, and I assume that that's not inexpensive to build, but if you could incent the developer to foot the bill for it as well as put up the land to do it, it seems like it would go a long ways toward helping offset this issue.
Yeah, we do have, in our technical manual, we have a whole big, lots of low-impact development concepts. And there are incentives that if they use these low-impact development concepts, they can get like rewards like additional parking or narrower streets. The city
curious to
staff
that.
did a lot of work developing the technical manual.
Aren't a lot of those for your development versus my concept is reach beyond your borders and do low impact development and stormwater ponds and those kind of things that actually pulse or allow stormwater from outside the boundaries of your property to flow into those pieces, and actually absorb stormwater on your development that's beyond your development.
Yeah, I think that probably they're gonna have enough trouble trying to keep their own stormwater on their own developments. And especially when the new stormwater rules kick in at the end of 2025. I think that's why you're gonna see a big rush of people trying to push their developments through now to try to get out in front of stronger stormwater rules that are gonna take effect in 2025, December 28th, 2025. That's the deadline. So I understand what you're saying, but I can't imagine any developer giving up part of their development to accept stormwater from somebody, from a city street.
It might not get built otherwise, that's my point.
Do what?
The development might not get built otherwise unless they do
okay.
that kind of a thing. So that might be the incentive.
That's a pretty strong incentive.
I'm thinking that,
I don't think that the city could legally tell a developer that they have to store stormwater from a street or from an older development. I don't know.
that area in Titusville that's causing to drain in the Indian River instead of St. John's, it looks like a balloon. What do you think about pausing any development inside that until we figure out what to do?
Well, yeah, but you'd have to pause it around the whole perimeter of the
Yeah.
wetlands, like all along 405.
Sanford
Would
has done that,
basically be-
not for this reason.
Well,
Yeah, I think the problem is we need to educate our elected officials because they tend to think that anytime you dump fresh water, it's good water.
Yeah.
And we debated a lot because they don't want to hear it, that the activity at the Space Center is dumping fresh water into the lagoon.
Yes, it is.
It's Elon Musk.
Yes.
Yeah, because he has all these launches that he's dumping water. And he may not know it has such an adverse effect on the Indian River and other rivers. You know, really think we do need to pause the development in that area and adjoining areas till we figure out what we can do. And like Laura Lee said, there's plenty of grants out there.
The first step would be to get a feasibility study to try to understand what actually can be done to try to change the situation of us funneling all that water into the river. There'd have to be some kind of a study that's done. So you'd have to get a grant for that first. And then once feasibility study is done and you learn what it is you can do, then you got to go find a lot of money to do whatever corrective measures that you can do then.
And this question I'm going to ask you, and you know it, it's kind of a dumb question. I remember when we moved here in '67, you could go to the pier and pull up all kinds of shrimp, angelfish, even blowfish. The river was extremely active. What's happened now?
All you catch is catfish.
All the
You go out to the pier and go fishing, the only thing you're going to catch is catfish. Because the diversity of life in the lagoon has been greatly diminished by the loss of the seagrass beds. We had 100% loss of our seagrass beds. The bottom of the river looks like a desert. And then we've got, because of the nutrients that are in the river, you have caulerpa, which looks like a seagrass, but it's not a seagrass, but it's better than nothing. Caulerpa has started growing and it's holding the bottom down. And then you have that red and brown drift algae that blows up against the shore and then dies and rots and stinks, and people think you have a sore spill, but it's really rotting algae. That's what we have in the river, in our part of the river.
Okay, Laura Lee, we really like your presentation and we appreciate you being here. I might mention that you were the restaurateur of the year last year, or this year.
Last year.
Okay, for the whole state of Florida. And
Thank you.
you served on the National Seashore Estuary,
I was on the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council.
appointed by President Biden.
No, I was appointed by Governor DeSantis, but then after 4 years of having a really good time on the council, I was not reappointed for many reasons I won't go into, but.
And you are, for those that don't know, a part of owner in Dixie Crossroads. So and you're the chairman of TEC right here in Titusville. We're lucky we have you.
Well, thank you.
Serious.
Thank you. Yeah, my menu mix at the restaurant, when my parents opened the restaurant 40 years ago, the only thing they served was stuff out of the Indian River Lagoon. You know, we got, well, the shrimp are offshore and they're caught by the shrimp boats, but they use the lagoon as a nursery. But we had mullet and trout and, you know, not redfish, but mullet, trout, sheephead, black drum, you know, clams and oysters all came out of the Indian River Lagoon. That we were the locals' seafood restaurant. But over the 40 years that we've been there, we've had to completely change our menu mix as the lagoon died. You know, couldn't get local seafood anymore. I serve mostly, as much as I can, domestic seafood that comes out of American waters that are caught by American fishermen, but it is not coming out of the Indian River Lagoon. mean, I watched in my lifetime, I've watched the Indian River Lagoon go from a body of water that it was the most productive estuary in the state of Florida, and it supported hundreds of families, of commercial fishing families. There's nobody left there's a few people trying to eke out a living growing clams down by Sebastian Inlet and up north, up by in New Smyrna. So there are some aquaculture operations, but as far as a real commercial fisherman going out in a boat and trying to make a living and support a family, they're gone. They're not there anymore. They can't make a living anymore.
The city of Titusville is so lucky that you serve as chairman of TC.
Well, the city of Titusville, we are so blessed. You know, you go south, they don't have any seagrass growing off of their towns. They're bulldozing all their trees. We haven't ruined our environment up here the way they have down there. I mean, it's solid development down there. We still have some really nice pockets of woodlands right in the middle of town. And like I said, our waters up here supply life to the rest of the lagoon. So we are the stewards of what grows up here moves to the other parts of the lagoon. And it's very, very important that we maintain that. And it's very important that the development at the Space Center does no further harm to the lagoon, because the development that took place in the 1960s in the Space Center was catastrophic to the condition of the lagoon. And when they diked the salt marshes and built earthen dams around all the salt marshes are like the lungs of the lagoon. They filter out all of the stuff out of the water, and it's the nursery areas for the shrimp and the fish and the crabs. And they turned 100% of the salt marshes across the river, they turned them into freshwater cattail ponds. So the bass fishing in the 1960s, late 1960s and 70s was fantastic. But the lagoon died. So they figured out that they were trying to keep the dusky seaside sparrow from going extinct. And the last place that the dusky seaside sparrow had been seen was one certain impound out on the wildlife refuge. So they put culverts under the dikes and reconnected the river to what once was a salt marsh. And very quickly, the cattails died, the Carolina willows died, and your emergent salt marsh vegetation started coming back. And they went, wow, this is really cool. So the dusky seaside sparrow went extinct, but they saw what could happen by reconnecting those old historic salt marshes back to the Indian River Lagoon. That's why we have life up here. It's because of when you drive around the Black Point Wildlife Drive out on the wildlife refuge, you're driving on a earthen dam that was put around a salt marsh in the 1960s for mosquito control so that the workers could work out at the Space Center. And I strongly believe, and I think that's probably why I'm not on the Federal Fish Council anymore, because the governor, he did not reappoint me. But I think it's because of things that I have said about development at the Space Center impacting the lagoon. And that's probably one of the reasons that I'm not there. A lawsuit over dead manatees might have been another reason. But anyway, I had fun while I was there. But, it took a lot of time. So now that I'm not on the council anymore, I have more time to work on the lagoon.
Any other questions?
I have one, Dad. I have several.
Okay.
Your first thing that you showed up here.
Oh, can you come to the mic so that it's on record?
They can hear me.
Okay.
Was playing in the beach.
Yes, sir?
And you
What
get
did you
your
plan
name
on?
and address for the record?
Sure.
You don't have to stand.
Carry it over there
Got
to
to
you.
do something, you can't hear me.
Because it's
No, my
important what
question-
you're going to say, I'm sure.
No, my question was, what were you planning on doing with, over at Playland the Beach? Are you planning on putting those concrete pyramids out there?
No, sir. They're
Okay.
just going along the south side of the Titusville Causeway.
And what is that gonna do to the, watercrafts and all? How's it gonna affect them?
Well, we hope that the jet skis won't be allowed.
You hope they
inside-
won't.
Yeah, but there's no law that can stop it. But we want to discourage the jet skis from moving around inside them. The jet skis aren't supposed to be in the waters of the wildlife refuge anyway. They don't
Is it,
belong
is
there.
this a wildlife refuge out here?
Well, it is on the east side of the river.
Well, they're on the south side of the bridge on the middle of the river. Is that part of the wildlife?
Out a certain distance away from the shoreline.
No, I don't know. I wasn't arguing with
Yes,
you. I
sir.
just don't
Yeah.
know. I just wondered because we have a lot of activity out there, or we did have. And I go over there quite often, and I haven't seen but one or two boats in the last month or two.
Right, because they can't launch off the beach on the north side anymore.
Is that gonna be permanent? They won't be able to launch off the north side?
They can't launch off of a seawall.
Well, I don't know what you're doing, ma'am, so
Okay, yeah.
that's the reason I'm
So, yeah,
asking
no,
you.
the north side of the causeway has a seawall. the
I see that,
entire
but I
length
didn't
of
know
the
whether you're gonna have
causeway.
any ramps down there or not.
There's 2 ramps, but they're not gonna be able to, that's only for, people to hand carry kayaks and canoes and maybe day sailors.
And another thing then, I don't wanna hold y'all up,
No, you're fine.
but another thing you had mentioned when you were talking about Whispering Hills area, that's where we live.
Okay,
And every day I go, every time you have a rain, a little short rain, we will flood all the way from Barna down to Harrison and Harrison down to Hopkins, and Hopkins is flooded. We've been doing this stormwater drainage or work on for years now. It hasn't changed a thing in that route. I won't say it hasn't changed a thing, but it hasn't changed a thing in that route. And now they're gonna go up on our prices, and it looks to me like we're running good money against bad, just throwing it away because it's not making any difference. But anyway, the only place I've ever seen any number of horseshoe crabs is on the NASA Causeway. Were you also including that?
no, sir, NASA has cameras on that causeway so that they can study. You're right. Horseshoe crabs have to have a sandy beach.
Yeah, no.
The
And they
Titusville
made up
Causeway
there.
and the NASA Causeway are the only 2 causeways left in Brevard County that aren't covered with rocks. So NASA has cameras on that causeway that they are videoing the spawning horseshoe crabs. And I have deep concerns that they may eventually, the causeway's really, really wide where the crabs are nesting, so hopefully they're gonna be okay. But if that causeway starts eroding really, really bad, they'll put rocks on it.
Oh, yeah, they always do.
They always do, yeah.
And may I ask you one question? Will y'all take the information she's given you about the drainage or what do you call it, St. John's drainage? And the stormwater, and have your stormwater people look into that to see if this is what's causing the problem, if this filling that up, that ditch or whatever that is you called it, and cause this to back up when it rains? Because if it's not draining properly, it's gonna back up. And if that's the place to start with it, why don't you look into that for drainage and help us out with that stormwater problem and our street flooding?
Well, I think it's more detailed than that.
No, but it'd be a place to start.
Yeah, that's the council's concern, because they're the ones that can order the studies done by the staff. We just make recommendations to council. And since we've got a newly elected councilman up here, councilperson. Yes, we do. We'll think about it. We'll do something. Can we have
The reason I'm saying this,
can we have your name for the record
Bob Truitt,
and your address?
1808 Hamlin Street,
Okay.
right across the street from where you're gonna tear down that school.
Yeah.
You're right there by Temple Terrace where all that flooding is.
No, I'm right in the middle of Sisters Heights, and they're right across the street from me.
Yeah.
And the Whispering Hills Elementary School is across the other way.
Yep.
But, that's gonna be another question.
They cannot block that ditch right now, or your street would go underwater. So they
Well-
can't, that's why the ditch is still running the way it is, because they would flood your neighborhoods.
Or down near on Harrison Avenue, I can't remember what the name of the street was, it's Pilgrim or something like that. About a month ago, it rained maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm serious. You almost flooded your car out going through there. It's over the curbs. It got so bad. And it's one of the worst parts of the area. And I just wondered if anything was ever going to be done to really help us. But I would appreciate it, sir.
Okay, thank you.
That's the goal, is to get something done. And you're right, we cannot line 405 with apartment complexes, or we're gonna make the flooding in these older neighborhoods even worse. Because, there's stormwater, and when you displace, and fill in a wetland here, well, where's the water gonna go that was in that wetland that they're filling in to build the apartment complex? It's just gonna make the flooding worse somewhere else. So your suggestion of putting a moratorium on development along the 405 corridor?
Pause sounds nicer
At
than
least until
moratorium.
we can get a study done that can tell us, what we need to do. Just, it doesn't make sense to just go ahead with a bunch of development now, knowing what you know now. I mean, I about passed out the first time I saw that drawing, that showed that funnel. I always knew in my heart that there was something really not good going on there. But when I saw that picture that's in the slideshow, I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, that explains it all now. That explains it.
That's why I was so shocked by this presentation you made at Rotary. And I called Eddie as soon as I got in the car to arrange to have you here. for this
And Eddie's
meeting.
going, oh, her again?
I appreciate it.
Well,
Any other questions? Okay.
thank you very much
Thank
for having
you.
me.
I do have a question for Eddie, and this might be a question for the city manager, but how would we go about, with our grant writer for the city, we work with her in order to get a feasibility study? Because I'd love to not just talk about it, I'd love for it to actually be a plan that we have in place, and this is step one, this is step two. And so what would that look like if we wanted to, let's say in the future, move forward with this?
Sure, process-wise, so we don't just have one grant writer. Some of the departments have staff that are kind of head the grants for each of the divisions. The first step would be council would need to provide advisability to apply for some of these grants. So the first step would be council letting staff know the intent of the feasibility study, and so that way we can start looking for the grant opportunities. Once we found an opportunity and it's available, council has to approve staff applying for the grant. Once it's received, council has to accept the grant. The feasibility study, we'd probably most likely have to go out to a continuing contract, or we may have to go through the whole purchasing process, which means that we have to provide a call for qualifications, and firms are invited to provide their qualifications that they're qualified to write a feasibility study for the city. So it can take some time, but that's the first few steps.
Thank you so much. So that I just, to reiterate, the first step would be the council letting the staff know what the intent is, and that would be kind of the presentation that you presented tonight, would be a good start with that. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you for coming.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Next item is petitions and requests from the public present. Okay. Reports, staff?
No report, sir. Thank you.
No report. City Attorney, Chelsea?
I have nothing at this time.
I don't have anything to report. Any other member? Okay, then we stand adjourned at 7:50. Or is it